So welcome, bienvenue, Anine, to everybody today to Exploring Equitable Approaches to Outdoor Learning. This is another in our series of collaboratively organized webinars from the Toronto District School Board Sustainability Office and Eco Schools program, as well as from OISE's Sustainability and Climate Action Network. My name's Hilary Inwood. I'm the coordinator of SCAN, that's the Sustainability and Climate Action Network, and I'm very pleased to welcome my colleagues from the TDSB. We've got many of them in the room today, which is fantastic, but I'm going to do a special shout out to Pam Miller, who's the instructional leader for Eco Schools at the Toronto District School Board, as well as David Hucker-Budlowski, who's the central coordinating principal, is here for outdoor education, and of course the amazing Jen Vetter from Eco Schools as well. So we've got lots of people in the room that we work with and who we know, and we're thrilled to have you all with us today. Now, with that, we're going to start with, of course, a land acknowledgement. And I will say that this is what you can expect for the webinar before we do that land acknowledgement. We've got a panel today, so a little bit different. We've often done sharing of practice, and there will be some sharing of practice, but not with slides today. We're going to have feature some of the incredible educators from the TDSB, who have been working hard on ensuring that there are more equitable approaches to outdoor learning happening in the school board. And we're going to do that to pick their brains a little bit and to learn from their expertise. So with that, our land acknowledgement is actually going to come from another school board today. So I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to do a short video from the Waterloo Region District School Board. Love this short video that reminds us about the importance of land-based Indigenous studies, not just at the WRDSB, but in all of our school boards, in all of the educational contexts that we work in.
There is a way that Indigenous people live in relation to land that we've kind of gotten away from when we talk about education.
Land-based Indigenous studies for me is the mixing of culture, knowledge, and then bringing forth that kind of traditional understanding of what land and science, food sustainability, and spirit mean.
If we're going to be comparing it between a mainstream and a land-based education system, the differences would be things like a classroom is a colonial system of education. Chairs, desks, writing utensils, that's all colonial education. So land-based education really brings people to the land and understanding the relationships with the land, all the things that the land produces that have relationships with each other.
When we learn more about best practices for incorporating Indigenous worldviews into classrooms and curriculums, we discover that we really need to be taking students outside and connecting them with the land and connecting them with Indigenous knowledge keepers and community members.
A lot of mistakes were made with colonization, and what it's done is it's made us reliant heavily on grocery stores and food that's really not feeding our spirit and our thriving as humans. And so part of this work, it's not just about planting trees, it's more about recovering people's memory of what it means to be human.
The best lesson I give in a classroom will never compare to the memories and the knowledge and the way they absorb it, because they carry that knowledge with them wherever they go moving forward. The next time they're on a walk, they're walking their dog, right? If they go on a cottage or camping, they see things that they never noticed before, and they share things actually in a different way. We were joking this morning out on the land that we've covered a lot of science, math, phys ed. We've covered all these curriculums just by our conversations in the active part of our learning.
So today we're planting a variety of fruiting trees and shrubs. So we have a couple oak species, we have witch hazel, hazelnut, serviceberry, hawthorn, and American plum, and also pawpaw. They all produce edible fruit and nuts.
It is not learning in the sense of I am learning something new, but it's just more of a reassurance about how we need to spend time doing these kind of things, even though it might seem we're just planting trees all day. But I think it's more important than that.
Personally, I really like the planting, the aspect of leaving my mark somewhere type thing, for lack of a better term. Just knowing that, like, if I were to come back here in 20 years, 10 years, whatever, then, like, I helped that. I was a part of that.
I really hope that students will walk away with an understanding about who they are in relation to the rest of Mother Earth.
My favorite part of it is seeing the light bulbs go off when they realize, oh, wait a second, we are intrinsically connected to the land, right? Everything that I just put in my mouth at lunchtime, oh yeah, it came from the land.
I think that video, for me anyway, is a good reminder not only of the cross-curricular learning that takes place on the land, but the importance of centering Indigenous voices in this work when we are taking our students outside. So I'll pop in a minute, I'll pop the link to that video into the chat for you, and I encourage you to take another look at it. I've seen it a couple of times, and I get something new from it every single time, so I think it's well worth learning from our colleagues at the Waterloo Region District School Board, and we thank them for their work in putting that short video together. Now, with that, we acknowledge that we're hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on this land. We know that when we give land acknowledgements, when we center Indigenous voices, it's not enough. We need to take action ourselves. And today's video is really all about that. It's about how do we bring diverse perspectives and diverse knowledge to taking our students outside for outdoor learning. And we have a wonderful set of panelists today. So I'd like to introduce you to them at this point. Alison Williams is a teacher with the TDSB and is currently working in the Outdoor Education Department at TUSC, which is the Toronto Urban Studies Centre. She's always passionate about the environment, and Alison is focused on making the outdoors accessible for students and their families, regardless of where they live, their cultural background, or their prior experiences with the natural world. She has a deep interest in science and environmental education, as well as community development at the local and international level. And Alison, I know you didn't include this in your bio, but we are thrilled that you are a recent graduate from our Masters of Education program here at OISE. So we got to figure a way to bring you back in for a doctorate maybe at some point. I'd like to also introduce you to Sylvia Denton Carryl, who is the Outdoor Learning Coordinator for the TDSB. In this new initiative, she provides leadership and support to a team of outdoor education teachers as they work to engage school communities in outdoor learning within their local green space. Prior to this new role, Sylvia has worked as an outdoor education teacher and site supervisor. She's passionate about using the outdoors as a third teacher and firmly believes that students from diverse backgrounds should see themselves reflected and experience the outdoors as welcoming spaces. Sylvia, we're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for making the time. And our third panelist is Marguerite Campbell. Marguerite has over 30 years of experience in education. She began her career with the TDSB as a primary junior teacher and moved into school administration as a VP, as a principal, and most recently as a superintendent of schools in the Rexdale and Etobicoke areas of Toronto. Somewhere in there, in your spare time, Marguerite, you were seconded to both York University and OISE as course directors in pre-service teacher education. We were really lucky to have Marguerite, and that's actually where I met Marguerite initially, was part of our teacher ed program, she's brought her expertise in equity, diversity, and social justice to all of the work that she's done, both in the school board and at these universities. Now, we were teasing her earlier that she is, retired, but her retirement activities involve being involved in the East York Scarborough Reading Association, which organizes the Reading for the Love of It conference, the Rotary Club of Guelph, the One World Schoolhouse, the Canadian Black History Project, and the Scientists in Schools programs. So no dust on you, Marguerite, in your retirement at this point in time. The last person I'd like to introduce you to is my colleague, Pam Miller, who I just briefly mentioned at the beginning. Pam is going to act as moderator for today's panel. Pam is presently the Eco Schools instructional leader with the TDSB out of the Sustainability Office. And she has over 28 years of experience working in education as an outdoor educator and as an environmental educator and as a classroom teacher. In her current role, she works with a wide variety of education professionals and youth, supporting them as they engage in environmental programs and actions that contribute to a healthier, greener, and more sustainable future. She is most passionate about cultivating practices at schools that foster deep relationships with nature, with place, with community, and helping champion issues that matter most to students. So can I give a huge welcome and bienvenue and Anine to all four of you, and we look forward to this conversation today.
Great, thanks, Hillary. I'm actually thinking I'm 30 years, just like Marguerite. Oh my gosh. If I could just follow in her footsteps, I would be honored. All right, and I've had the privilege of meeting these amazing women as well and working with them in different ways. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So our first question is really asking each of the participants to talk about their journey into outdoor education and outdoor learning. Now, before I pass the mic over, I just want to give our participants, we're going to use those words outdoor learning and outdoor education interchangeably, but we also may come to those names with different experiences. So outdoor education in the TDSB represents a very specific program that students, we have educators that are experts in outdoor education, and they can come to the students or the students go to their sites. And outdoor learning is really a bigger, perhaps, umbrella term for when you take learning beyond the classroom walls and you put it into the world that the students inhabit, and we'll call that outdoor learning. But ultimately, the two could be interchanged. But because we have a context in TDSB, outdoor education often refers to a formal experience with extra staff or experienced staff that come and support the homeroom teacher. All right, so in no particular order, Sylvia, you are first on my screen. So why don't you start us off? How did you come to this work?
There are so many ways. I think some of my early years is just working the land with my dad. My parents are Caribbean, and agriculture and farming was always a part of something they did. And when they came here and migrated to Canada, doing that reminded them of home. And so my dad would always have some kind of garden, an elaborate garden in the backyard. My mom would always be the one reaping, and we would always be out there either helping with that process or doing all kinds of things, in the garden and in the backyard. So I think those are some of my first early years, and always just being outside. I'm actually remembering some of the early memories with my sister and making food for the ants out of like these little petals, these little white petals. And, we had to make sure there was enough food for them, and just all the different ways that we explored outside. And I carried that into my career and work with students and always finding ways to connect the curriculum to outside and how can we get outside and do that learning. So I think those are some of my early experiences and how I brought it into my profession.
Wonderful. I was just with some students from Agnes MacPhail, grade 6 students who talked about their grandmother's gardening, and now they're in the Equitable Club. So gardening has such a great connection. And I think there's some real ecological benefits for getting soil on our hand, and the microbes help our health. So really great connections. Thanks, Sylvia, for sharing. Alison, you are next on my screen, and then Marguerite. So how did you come to this work?
Like Sylvia, my family's from the Caribbean and South America, and gardening and growing your own food was a part of what we did. And I learned that basically from my parents, my father and my mother. And another thing that I'm grateful for is we used to go camping. So we had our little trailer and we would go to see different places in Ontario and other parts of Canada. And that really gave me a chance to explore and see other parts outside of the city. So when you go to a provincial park, you get a chance to do swimming and hiking and walking and just being in the dark when it's actually dark. Those kind of things I really cherish, and I continue to do that with my own family. And then when I was teaching, I taught a variety of different grades. So, kindergarten, special education. But it wasn't until I started working in kindergarten that I really had a chance to do a lot more outdoor learning with my students. The grade lends itself to that. It's not to say you can't do it in any other grade, but kindergarten really opens up the door for that. So from there, I realized, I wanted to explore that more. And so now I'm in the role of outdoor education teacher, where I get a chance to work with different grades between kindergarten and grade 8. And sometimes students come to me with their teachers in their classes for programs. Other times I go to them. And the best part about it is I get to work with teachers in their schools. So I have schools with which I work, and we're finding ways to plan together and teach together. And it's wonderful. And it's amazing when you realize that the outdoors is not, bringing the outdoors as part of your learning is not an extra thing. It's something that can be done with relative ease. It's just a matter of changing the way we think about it.
Oh, so nice. And again, Alison, I love how you bring the kindergarten story into your story, because as I've known you, you bring such a sense of wonder to everything you do. And it's almost like you've got that child's like spirit with you that helps engage you with students, but also make the bridge to nature. So that's so neat that that's part of your story too. Marguerite.
Well, interestingly enough, my family background is also West Indian, but unlike Sylvia and Alison, my family did nothing outside. I came to outdoor ed purely by accident. I was a central coordinator principal for literacy, numeracy, and ESL, and outdoor ed kind of came to teaching and learning, and I thought, I just kind of put my hand up and thought, I need to do something kind of outside my comfort zone a little bit, because that's just how you keep learning in education. And so when the opportunity was there and one of us needed to take the portfolio, I thought, well, why not? I'm going to learn something. And so I became the central coordinating principal for outdoor ed. Those poor outdoor ed teachers and supervisors, they must have thought, what is going on here? However, I've got to say it was the best learning experience of mostly of my career. It was so phenomenal. I don't even like to eat outside, much less camping and all these kinds of things. And I really had a massive shift in how I thought about learning. And we didn't even have this sort of language of outdoor learning at the time, because it was such a focus on the outdoor ed centers. But it really became clear that what the learning that was happening in these outdoor ed centers, we needed to find a way to shift that and create much more of it, of what was happening in the outdoor ed centers in schools. So I still don't love to eat outside. However, I have a much better love for the outdoors, and certainly getting out there more often.
Oh, that's such a fun story, Marguerite. And having worked under you as that supervisor, what I appreciated is how you championed it regardless of your early beginnings. And you just had a passion towards making sure that our kids got there. So that's neat. Now, my story, I was kicking and screaming. My dad was an outdoor ed prof, and I kicked and screamed and didn't want to listen to the chickadees and stay still and all of that. But here I am. So look at the path we've taken. All right. So interesting enough, obviously there are lots of research out there about the benefits of learning outdoors, but the three of you have really seen that firsthand. And when I'm talking about the outdoors, we're really talking about both natural and built spaces, because in Toronto, our students' environment is where they live, where they breathe, where they play, where they walk in their neighborhoods. So we're not just talking about natural environments, we're really talking about the world around them. And so what message would you share with okay, so let's say you're in front of a committee or a group of people that are these students' caregivers and their community. Why is it important that their child participate in learning outdoors? And I'm going to go backwards this time, Marguerite, then Alison, then Sylvia. What message? And if you want to pass because someone else has said, that's absolutely fine too. But how would you convince the people in front of you that this stuff is good?
Well, I'm not sure about the convincing part. I think there's an idea that learning, and I think it's as it talked about in the video that we saw earlier, this sort of Eurocentric idea that learning must happen inside a box with a door, with desks in rows. And, we've had a little shift. So maybe now we can put the desks together in a group and do some group learning. But real learning happens inside a classroom. And I think that shift in that understanding of where learning happens, I think is amazing. And I think one of the things about putting in front of families and caregivers is the reality and the realization of what they do with their families and what they do with their children when they take them to the park and when they take them outside and they do pieces. All of that is really good, deep learning. And so the advantages of just the health advantages of being outside, and I think we have certainly come to understand over the past few years how the advantages of not being inside a classroom, health-wise, and so much learning can happen outside. So I don't know. I'm hoping it wouldn't take too much convincing to get people to understand that how important it is to be and learn outside.
Great. And Alison, could you also cater your answer, because you were an early literacy expert, could you maybe cater your answer to a little bit about literacy and how the outside benefits literacy learning?
Sure. I think that it kind of lends itself really well because a lot of times children are curious. So for example, when I would take my class and we would go and take a look at the way that when it was raining, they would look at the worms and wonder why worms are out. And then we would go do a writing activity or a drawing activity where they get a chance to express themselves. Sometimes they realize they're not even realizing that they're learning. Like it's just exploring. They want to know. They're very curious. They want to expand their learning. With literacy, you can use it for so many things. I mean, kindergarten is specific, but it's amazing. Like, I don't know how else to describe it unless you try it yourself. But there was one thing I wanted to add to Marguerite's point is one of the classes that I had, we were at Taylor Creek Park, which is not too far from Victoria Park Station. And it was a class that, I think it was grade 6. And one of the students said to me, we come here all the time, but I've never really seen it this way. And so the nice thing is we have all these wonderful spaces. Let's say you live in Toronto. We have these spaces, and for some of us, they're over there, or they're, we go on the weekend or we have a picnic. Now we can see it through another lens. So they looked at it, the trees differently, the river differently, the creek differently. So.
Oh, and that's such a powerful example of how it can change our perspectives. And really, that's what we need in this climate crisis is a real shift of perspectives. So thank you for sharing both of those antidotes. Sylvia, so sometimes you have teachers that are actually volunteering to be part of your outdoor collaborative inquiry. So maybe, as Marguerite said, there isn't convincing, but what kind of benefits are you seeing?
So many. So many times we see students' connection to the land, and the ways that they build relationship with the land, whether it's about learning about honorable harvests and what that means and how to take care when you're interacting with the land. Sometimes it's for students to see that people like them contributed to the environment in different ways. Today I was at a school in Jane and Finch area, and students were asked to hug the tree that they've been journaling about over the last few months. And as one of the students went and hugged the tree, and she was observing and noticing any changes from the last time she saw it, she looked up and she saw a Western screech owl. And that was the first time many of them had ever seen an owl in person outside of the zoo or African lion safari. And we just stood there and watched in awe. Surprised the owl did not fly away as well, but just watched in awe, and then returned to the class to do some research. And we kind of thought, this owl must be here on a regular basis, just that no one noticed. And so, students want to go back and see, the next time if the owl is there, but just that wonder. And so those are the benefits when they are able to really zone in and connect with nature, and really notice things that they didn't notice before. And like Alison said, they go home and they tell their parents about that new spot that they found, or that walk that they took that's maybe close to home, but they never really explored it before. So many amazing benefits that you see all the time from students interacting.
Wow. I'm hearing wellness, I'm hearing literacy, it's really, blossoming their sense of curiosity and inquiry, which we know are amazing skills to have. So fabulous. Of course, we also know there's another side, and why we're here today talking about equitable approaches. So there's a new book out by Rue Mapp, and she's started a program called Outdoor Afro, and she's in the West Coast. And recently we were gifted, thank you, David, this lovely book called Black Faces, White Spaces, and it's also a great read so far. So Rue Mapp talks about nature has long been a place of healing and joy for Black communities. And yet her book is about inspiring Black communities to reclaim their place in the natural world. Could any of you speak to some of the barriers for K-12 students to participate in learning outdoors? How does racism, classism, ableism play a part in putting up barriers for Black communities to connect to the outdoors?
Well, maybe I'll start.
Go ahead.
You're all right, Sylvia? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Well, one of the things I was thinking is in some ways it's about the biases we hold about the Black community. I mean, I think Sylvia and Alison both mentioned it earlier about their families come from roots in land and roots in earth. And I think there's this, there's a perception perhaps that we as in the Black community, we don't do that. The camping idea, the going to the cottage idea, all of those kinds of things, we don't ski, that getting outside. And I think that that perception, sometimes many of us in the Black community have done that to ourselves, to be honest. However, I think there is a kind of an underlying perception that that's not there. And I think one of the pieces that happens is that folks who are working in schools and thinking about taking students outside really have to challenge the biases that they come with about who does what and who is able to do what. I think we make assumptions about many communities. For example, Muslim communities don't let their girls go outside, all those kinds of stereotypes that happen. And I think we need to just kind of challenge those biases, first of all, before we make decisions about who can and who can't.
Thank you. Sylvia?
Yeah, absolutely agree, Marguerite. And I was going to add as well that just sometimes for the Black community, that feeling of belonging and feeling welcomed, sometimes that is at play, and that can present a barrier. And there's policing that happens when many Black communities are out in the environment. So whether that's going for a hike or, canoeing or just enjoying the outdoors, and asking, hello, how are you doing? That's okay. But sometimes what are you doing here? What brought you out here? Some of those interrogating questions, that sometimes the questions need to stop at, actually the conversation needs to stop at, hi, how are you doing? And just keep it moving, because those kinds of questions that come off as policing, that will further create a barrier and cause people from the Black community to feel like they don't belong there, or that they're not welcomed there. So I think a big thing is that when Black people are out there enjoying the outdoors and finding joy and doing things that bring them, just that lift their soul, don't disturb their peace. Because when you disturb their peace, that creates a barrier.
Thank you. And Alison, I'm going to go to the next question because it also speaks to barriers that we have personally. And so this one is, sometimes our barriers can include our own comfort, our own knowledge or willingness to engage students in outdoor education or learning. either on the school ground or to an outdoor ed center. And even yet last year, I had, students, I just was anxious when I took them outside. And I'm an experienced outdoor educator, but it was not knowing the students in the way that I wanted to. But in TDSB, we have the privilege of having access to outdoor education centers and staff. And all of us present here have a connection to outdoor education. But then you, in particular with Sylvia, are working on outdoor learning when you go to, you're in a relationship with the homeroom teacher and you're building that capacity and using the outdoor learning as an inquiry. What value, and again, very specific to your own experience, because you wear those both hats, what values are you seeing in the one role and what values are you seeing in the other role?
Okay, thanks. I'll speak about the first role in terms of going into outdoor spaces. As you can see, I'm in a greenhouse, and this is one of the places where students can come. They have a variety of programs. So grade 3s, grade 6s. And so I'll turn it this way because I want to focus on this tree. This is the banana tree. And just this Tuesday, it happened again. I have a variety of students that come from different parts of the world, different places in Toronto. And when they come here and they know, they say to me, many children say to me, is that a banana tree? And I say, oh, yes. Oh, and they would tell me that how their experiences with a banana tree or this rubber tree. Is this a rubber tree? Oh, I've seen this before. And so that kind of brings that kind of connection into their own cultural experience, especially if you're coming from a hotter country or a country that has warmer climates. So that's when they come here. When they come to other places, it's almost like they see it as a magical space in a magical world. And the beauty about having our outdoor ed way we have it at TDSB is that when you connect it back to your schools, for example, when I go and I work with teachers, it kind of has the ability to continue the learning. So it's not just we're going on a trip one day, we're here, where that's it. No, throughout the whole year, we get a chance to work with teachers and plan with the teachers, and the children or the students come to know you as, oh, you're coming, we're going to do something exciting. So I've had, quite a few experiences where say, oh, are we doing outdoor learning today? Are we going outside? Are we going to do? Yes, that's what we're going to do. And they really look forward to that. So they see their schoolyard or their local green space, whatever it is that their teachers choose, as a learning space, not just the playground. And we extend it with math, with science, with art, geography, anything. So I hope I answered the question.
You did. And I think you're really describing, in a sense, the spectrum and the journey. And there's so many different entry points, but they build on each other, almost like spaces that overlap. So thank you. I'm going to use, go ahead. Marguerite, I'm going to ask you to put on your principal, your central assigned principal hat when you were in outdoor ed. And so you've got staff that are going to centers, and what guidance would you give your staff to make sure that when they go on these field trips, that staff are conscious of making sure that our Black students or students that are marginalized, that they see their identities and their lived experience and their abilities also brought out in these visits. And the only reason I say that, as a new teacher, I remember going on a day trip and I didn't do that well. And so we end up having to send one of my students home. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so how would you guide us?
Well, I think there's two pieces to that. There's the teacher who's taking the students there, and then there's the teachers and the staff that are receiving them at the outdoor ed centers. And I think both of them have to work in conjunction with each other, and there has to be a lot of communication between them. And I think you as the teacher bringing your students, you know your students well, or you should know your students well, and you need to understand that. And so knowing the class that's coming, giving some support to the teachers who are at the outdoor ed center to say, this is the composition of my class. And so that the outdoor ed center can make some really specific support for when your students get there. One of the things the Outdoors Ed Centers, I know, and I haven't been involved with them for a little bit now, but I know even when I was there, they've done a lot more in terms of being welcoming spaces and having examples and experiences and games from multiple countries, et cetera, and kind of expanding that. And so I know that they've done a much better job over the years of being much more in an inclusive space. And so I think it really is being specific about the communication between who's going and who's receiving.
Great. And you're right. And it's also painting your students as with assets and not deficits, and saying, my kids do need to run around. That's a good thing. Thank you for that. Over to Sylvia. So what advice would you give to teachers that are reluctant to engage in outdoor learning with their students? How would you support them?
What I say to teachers all the time is that you don't have to know all of the things to go outside. And sometimes when they hear that we've worked at an outdoor ed center, or they hear the title of outdoor education teacher, they feel that you're this expert that knows everything about the outdoors. And so just demystifying that you don't need to know all of the things to just go outside your door. It's baby steps. It's maybe extending, instead of staying outside for recess, when going back in when the bell rings, staying outside a little bit longer, or going outside a little bit earlier. And it's so those small things. It's walking your schoolyard, being familiar maybe with some of the trees, the names of the trees that are out on your schoolyard, knowing some of the plants. It's all those little things. And what are those things that you could think about as it relates to the curriculum, and think about, okay, what about this needs to be inside, but what can I do to take this outside? And sort of flipping it on its head, and as opposed to thinking about it can only be done inside, what if I took it outside? What would happen? And in terms of that knowledge piece, because sometimes, teachers might say, but I don't know the names of the different plant species and the different birds. To that, I always say there's an app for that. There is an app for bird calls, plants, for trees, and I model using it. One, sometimes I don't know. And so I model using it. I remember one of the kindergarten students said to me, look it up on your phone, look it up, take a look. And so I model using that I don't have all the answers, and that when you don't, it's okay to use technology. And I think that too helps people to feel at ease about, okay, I can go outside and do all of these little things. And then it becomes a habit and a routine where now students are asking and saying, wait a second, we didn't go outside. Today, we didn't extend the recess today. We didn't take that extra time to learn through the outdoors. So I think it's those little steps, and then building on that.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug here, Pam, for a little organization that I can't say I'm working with them, but there's an organization here in Guelph that has done some amazing work. It's called Storytime Trail. And the idea is that they've connected literacy to being in the outdoors. And they've taken the pages of an entire book and put them on they look like real estate signs, and you put them in the ground and you put them around the outside of your playground or wherever you're working. And the students go from one sign to the other, reading the book. There's a QR code at the bottom of most of the signs so that they have activities to do and things for the teacher to do back in the classroom. And it's storytimetrail.ca. And, but it's, again, I was just thinking about it when Sylvia said, tiny steps. It really is a tiny step. You set it up, you take the students outside, the learning happens outside, but they're immersed in this literacy experience. It's quite phenomenal.
Oh, I love it. And Alison, sort of a related question. So Sylvia addressed, reluctant teachers, but we also have reluctant students. How do we work with reluctant students to enjoy the outdoors?
Reluctant students, it's funny because a lot of times, especially in the winter, it might have to do with the weather, the cold. So I remember when I was working with my last group, they said, I love working outside, but it's too cold. I don't like the cold. So sometimes it's about giving them the ideas about how to dress. It could be, okay, I need to have another sweater, I need to have such and such, that you might not necessarily have to go out and buy. You probably already have it at home. Sometimes it could also be the spaces that they're used to being in which they're used to being in. So maybe in their community or their classroom, it's not necessarily a place that they would go to after dark or in the evening times, and they have been told. So I'll give you a perfect example. I was with the school and there's a forest that's not too far. We don't go in the forest. We don't go in the forest, but we want to. So we went into the forest just last week on the day, I think it was last Thursday when we had a lot of snow, and they loved it. They didn't care about the fact that it was cold or that there was snow. As the educator, you can monitor and you say, okay, not many of my students have the equipment that they might need. So we're going to spend a little bit of time versus more time. Like, you as the adult can decide how you're going to gauge that. Not only that, when you get to really know your students, it might just be because they're uncomfortable and they've never done it before. So it might just be baby steps. Okay, we're going to go out here and find something that's intriguing about this part here. And then next time we'll come again. So sometimes if you have the time, it's about knowing the people with whom you're working. Sometimes it's knowing what they have or their prior experience with the space. And then when you put all those pieces together, you can find a way to make it work. It does take time, but you'll find that over time, they love it. And even with grade 8s who are sometimes can be reluctant, or grade 7s, you see a nice shift in the way that they view going outdoors.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to wrap up with one last question, and this is for all three of you. And it's really a combination of talking about Black joy in terms of, I'm going to ask you, if you had a wish, if I could grant your wish and in a way that would embed Black joy into our learning outdoors, what would you wish for? Or maybe we're already doing it. What strategies are there already there that we could take advantage of? So I'm going to start with Sylvia. What is your wish? I'm going to grant your wish. Besides going to Banff in May, by the way. For those of you who don't know, Sylvia and the research paper was accepted, and we're so excited about them sharing their wealth of knowledge at a conference. It just happens to be in Banff, which is really nice.
Thank you, Pam. So I think when I think about Black joy and outside, I think about liberation. If I had a wish, I would wish that more stories of liberation are shared and what that means in outdoor spaces. Stories of empowerment, of how Black people navigated the land and continue to navigate the land in ways that are amazing. The legacy, rich legacy, historical legacy over time. I would wish that the ways that the Black community continues to mobilize themselves and advocate as it relates to whether it's environmental racism, environmental justice, food sovereignty, the way that they collectivize and they navigate that, my wish would be for that to be shared, and that the rich legacies of my ancestors are shared in every way and in many opportunities. My quick story, my daughters are in their board, they had a Black excellence program on Tuesday, and they came home with a book about all the rich, talking about, well, one of the book talked about many things, but one of the parts was about the richness of African soil and the components of African soil. And I just kind of stood a little bit taller because I never learned about that before. And to know that they went to this program and they learned about, where their ancestors come from and their soil and their land, that's empowering. So my wish would be, I know it's a long wish, but my wish is for all of those things to be included in outdoor spaces so that particularly Black children, when they are engaged in the outdoors, they can stand a little taller.
Thank you. Alison, your wish next.
My wish would be for more people to have the opportunity to see how wonderful outdoor spaces can be. So whether it is finding ways to do it within your city, connecting to the land, maybe it's through gardening, like just to realize that we live on this land, but we depend on this land. Without it, we have no food, no medicine, nothing. So just the idea that we can actually connect in a way that we've come away from that. Just for me, it's opportunity. Like that's what I see the difference. And if you think in terms of different cultures or Black joy or even just finances, it's the opportunity for me that's important. Giving everybody the opportunity, or every child, or even families, to do that. That's my thing. That's my wish.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Well, I think Sylvia and Alison have spoken so beautifully and just wonderfully about that piece of if you could grant that little wish with your fairy godmother piece. The other thing I think is I'd like people to acknowledge the work that the Toronto District School Board has done in outdoor education over the years. And I know that there's been a lot of, cuts by, tiny little things over the years, but the fact that we still have outdoor education as such a large part of the work that the board does, the fact that Sylvia has a job in outdoor education, that is new. That's never happened before. And I think it is a testament to the history of outdoor ed in the board. I mean, even before we were amalgamated, each of the boards had some kind of focus on getting students, especially students from marginalized backgrounds, into the outdoors, with that understanding that not everyone had the opportunity to go to a cottage, and that we were welcoming people from all over the world, and we needed to give experiences. Right. So, just getting to the Island Natural Science School. Right. And so I think along with all of those other pieces, we need to give a little shout out to the board that they have maintained this. I mean, I don't know how many board meetings I sat through thinking, oh, nope, this is it. We're done. They're going to cut it. All this money they're spending. And yes, it's very true. It isn't the same. However, we are one of the only boards that has maintained these centers, have been, and in some ways have expanded offerings, and certainly brought outdoor education into a place where we acknowledge the lands that we're on. We have we support the ability for principals to shift budgets so that students are able to go to outdoor ed centers. And so, along with those wishes from Sylvia and Alison, I want to just put in a little piece to say we do need to acknowledge that we work for a board that has that it continues, hopefully for a lot longer, to maintain this work in the outdoors.
Thank you, Marguerite. And it's so great to hear, as you said, that equity was the roots of the TOES program, and TOES being Toronto Outdoor Education Schools, as we know, run by the board. And thank you for going to those board meetings. I was there too, just like fighting for outdoor ed, fighting for outdoor learning. So that's great. And of course, as we wrap this up, we know how this all feeds into our climate change education, because what you folks do by connecting people and loving the land and understanding, making that shift to how we are connected to the land, how important this is, because we can't live on an extractive mindset without doing the damage, or continuing to do the damage that we are. All right, so I think we have time for some questions. And I'm so excited because, again, these are amazing women, amazing outdoor educators with some fabulous experience to tap into. So if you have a question, just put that in the chat.
I'm going to ask one verbally to Sylvia. Sylvia, you are off to the conference at Banff to share the findings from the program that you run for the TDSB. Can you just give us one or two little sneak peeks into the findings that you've come up with so far out of the program? Not the whole thing. We know you're coming back to do another webinar for us later in the spring, but if there's one or two you can tease us with, that would be fantastic.
Some of the findings is just really reading and hearing the feedback from students about the benefits of being outdoors, whether it's for academic achievement, for wellness. Teachers talk about peace and the how just in general, it helps their overall well-being. And so I think those are some of the powerful findings from it, both from the teachers and from the students, just about how it helps their overall wellness, achievement. Teachers have said they feel so grounded in a world where it's so chaotic that being outdoors and being a part of this initiative helped to ground them and ground their practice.
Thank you so much.
And there's a question to you, Marguerite, about the name of the organization in Guelph. And it may have been in the chat before. Was it Storytime Trail? And Maria would like to know, I know over the years we've had different grades visit outdoor education centers. Could someone speak to which grades are now visiting outdoor education centers? And then maybe is there still the opportunity to have an educator come to you? Sylvia, do you want to take that one on?
Sure. So we target grade 2s and grade 4 and grade 6 for overnight. The goal is that students will have the experience of a day center and overnight center at those different points within their school career, but also dependent on waitlist availability, we're able to accept other grades to come to either a day or overnight center.
Yeah. And when I started outdoor ed with the City of York, it was K to 12. And so again, through cuts and things like that, we've had to target different grades. But that's why I think the outdoor learning piece is so important. Yep, Sylvia, add to that.
I forgot to say one more thing about the secondary piece.
Yes.
That we also do have a secondary teacher who supports secondary programs. So she provides just-in-time support to teachers and also secondary programming at Forest Valley.
Great. And are there still programs for virtual students? And are we still offering opportunities to have outdoor educators come to your school? Sylvia, it's back to you.
So there are opportunities for our staff to come to local schools, as well as with the partnership, the Outdoor Learning Support to Schools. Then we are in 25 schools and 9 teachers amongst those 25 schools. So those teachers have sort of a different partnership that is going on. But for just teachers looking for a visit, they can either come to our center or center staff can come to their school.
And I believe if you go to the quick links under TDSB web, for those of you in TDSB, and you go to a quick link, you can get to the outdoor education main portal, and that will lead you to all the different places for bookings, etc. Is that still valuable, Sylvia, or is there a better route?
No, I'm actually going to put the link in the chat.
Okay, wonderful.
Pam, can I add something about virtual? Because I was speaking with one of my colleagues just before we came, and we still do virtual. I know that she has a class that's actually going to be doing their grade 3 soils program here, and it's going to be done virtually. So if that's what you're teaching, there are those options.
Okay.
Thank you, Alison.
Great. And we have time for just one quick question. So where in this GTHA is one of your favorite spots that you like to go to? So...
Oh, I can start. I did my first visit to monocliffs, and it has become my absolute favorite spot to, I mean, everyone who comes, my kids are getting tired now. No, we're not going back there. There's got to be someplace else. But in all honesty, it is an absolute lovely, lovely spot to just go up to monocliffs. And, I kind of park outside the Outdoor Ed Center and take that walk around and the overlooking and down. It is really one of my favorite spots to go.
Right. And that does fit into Sarah's question about family events, because Monocliffs Provincial Park has some nice wide trails, and you can go there as a family, as well as many of our provincial parks offer that family. And I love their naturalist programs. I think Hillary and I, when our kids were small, took advantage of the provincial parks naturalist program. I think it was the Stars Night. That was so beautiful. All right, over to you, Alison. A favorite spot, either local or not too far.
I would say I have two favorite spots. So one would be the Rouge, because there's so many trails in there I like to go, and I love to walk in there even in the winter. And the second spot would be this place. I love it here. I'll show you, like, give you an idea. Like, this is where children and their families and, well, their parents, if they are volunteers, and their teachers come. So this has become one of my favorite spots because there's so much learning and awe when they get here.
Right. So, and there's other greenhouses in Toronto. Yes.
Yes, there are two. So there's one at Allen Gardens, and there's another one at, I forget what it's called. Centennial, like it's in the west in Etobicoke. Oh, the name escapes me now, but
yes,
it's
in Centennial Park. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay, yes. And that's beautiful because what the city does is they grow the plants that they're using in the local parks. They grow them all year round for that. So
nice. And Sylvia.
So many. So like Marguerite, I love Model Cliffs. I went there the first time when I was in grade 5, and still have the pictures to show. But I would say there's some local areas to hike around where I live in Vaughan, and I like hiking around in my neighborhood. When I was at Warren Park, I just loved standing by the water by Humber River and just listening or watching the salmon run. Those kinds of things bring me peace.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm with you. I like the combination of having the water. So any ravine, that's what you'll find me.
Yeah.
All right. Over to you, Hillary. It's our time.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our amazing panelists today. That was a great conversation. It's the kind of conversation that happens in the TDSB, but not always in public ways. So we really appreciate your time, Alison, Sylvia, and Marguerite, for sharing some of your experiences in the TDSB and your expertise in the area of outdoor learning. Pam, thank you so much for being a wonderful moderator, and lovely to have your perspective along the way as well. So I've just launched the feedback poll. If you can just take a minute, please, to tell us how we've done today. I did not do the heavy lifting. Everybody else did the heavy lifting, which I loved, and I learned a lot, which is fantastic. I am going to share screen just one more time, just to give you contact information for both the TDSB Sustainability Office, as well as OISE's Sustainability and Climate Action Network. And know that we've got more coming up after March break. We are aiming to do a webinar that will have teachers in the TDSB share some of their practices for Earth Day to get you thinking a little bit about April. Sylvia has very kindly said she'd come back and share in detail the research findings from the report out of the Outdoor Learning and Equity Program, which is amazing. And we are ending, hopefully, we're working to end the year in an in-person event. So as long as you are on our email list and as you've signed up, you'll get the information through the EcoSchools newsletter, through the SCAN listserv, and or you can pop on either of our websites to get this information too. So please join me in thanking our panelists for today and our moderator. Thank you so much today. What a wonderful conversation.